Good morning, everyone, esteemed guests and participants from around the globe. Myself, CA Shweta Goyal, Secretary to the Sustainability Reporting Standards Board of LCA, would like to welcome you to today's webinar on Life Cycle Assessment, a strategic tool for sustainable decision making. In today's sustainability driven world, businesses face growing pressure to minimize their environmental impact and enhance transparency. Life cycle assessment is essential for evaluating the environmental footprints of products from raw material to disposal. By identifying inefficiencies and areas of high environmental impact, LCA enables smarter decisions that reduce resource use, lower carbon emissions, and foster innovation. As regulation and stakeholder expectation rise, integrating LCA into business strategy is crucial for achieving sustainability goal and gaining a competitive edge in the market. In this webinar, we will delve into the strategic advantage of LCA and explore real-world applications that demonstrate its value in driving sustainable decision making and reducing carbon footprints. We would like to invite our today's speaker, CA Anil Shankar Gopinathan ji. He is a seasoned finance professional with over 30 years of experience in corporate finance, strategic planning, and business management. He has held senior leadership roles, including Group CFO for Manipal Group and CFO for Polycor Opticals and SLR India. Anil ji is an excel in M&A, ESG initiatives and turnaround strategies and financial restructuring with a strong focus on sustainable business growth. He is also a certified BRSR professional from ICA. Welcome you, sir.
Hello, hello everyone. Thank you for welcoming me. Am I audible?
Sure. Yes, sir.
Thank you for inviting me for this webinar. Hello everyone. Good morning. Shall I continue?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I will share my screen. Is my screen visible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Okay. So thank you all for taking the time for attending this webinar. A little bit more onto my connect with the sustainability. On the introduction, it has been told about my background. Yes, basically I'm a chartered accountant plus I'm a finance professional. My connect with the sustainability dates back to the 2006 when I joined as the CFO for the India operations of SLR, which was then SLR International and now merged with Luxottica. Now, the sustainable practices has been quite prevalent in that entity, that being a listed company in Paris Stock Exchange, and that they have been one among the early companies which has been into the sustainable practices, primarily because of the nature of the product. And the elementary reporting started in 2006 from India. China was not a large contributory markets for them, but was definitely the fastest growing market for SLR. So all our practices were subjected to this sustainability during those times. And it was under the GRI standard. From 2009, when it has become mandatory for reporting and also has started picking up over the years, then it was audited by the Big Four firm, including EY, and then our data was being plugged in. So my connect starts from there, from 2009. And then once I left the group, then came back to India and then started working for the Indian companies. Then only my connect with the sustainability reporting has stopped. But otherwise, that I've been well connected. So that is my introduction on the sustainable practices. Now, on today's topic, we will look into one specific area, which is the life cycle assessment. This is part of the sustainable practice, but yeah, I will first touch upon back the importance of sustainability. In sustainability, practices or sustainability following, as we all know, we cover the ESG, which is environment, social, and governance. Now, in the case of LCA, which is our today's topic, we will be looking at only one aspect, which is the environmental aspect. Now, on today's topic, we will have a quick introduction into the LCA assessment. Then we will also look at what all the different phases which the LCA has got, the applications which is being made, some of the tools which is available for us, and what type of supports are available, the regulatory and the policy implications, particularly or primarily in relation to BRSR, and also some of the advantages, challenges, and the future of the adoption of LCA. Now, first, that to the subject itself or to the definition itself of the life cycle assessment. Now, as the term indicates, it's about the life cycle of a product. Now, life cycle assessment or LCA is itself a tool. Tool of what? Tool of sustainability. Now, in case of the ESG practices, as we all know, this is related to a reporting unit. That is, if I'm working for a company or if I'm talking about the ESG practice, I talk about the ESG practice of that particular entity. While in case of LCA or the life cycle assessment, it goes beyond your entity. It's about a product or a service. That is, if say right through my webinar, I will try to use one typical example, which is of say gloves industry. Now, in the case of gloves industry, you as a manufacturer could be making gloves of different material. When we talk about LCA, it is about the entire lifespan, not of the company, but the entire lifespan of a product. So it can be either product or it can be a service. Now, the product has got a life which is within the entity. It has got a life before it has reached your entity, and it has got a life which is after the entity. This is what we typically call it as end-to-end approach, or the cradle to grave approach, or throughout the life cycle approach. That is, if as I said, in the case of gloves manufacturing, the industry is gloves, the manufacturing process takes place, but prior to the manufacturing process, there is a raw material which has been abstracted or which has been extracted from the natural resources that was available somewhere in the world, and it was made available to you for doing the manufacturing. Then you transport that material after the manufacturing to the end user. The end user then uses this product, and finally, after the use is done, it is being disposed back into the environment. Now, during the entire life cycle of this product, there is a carbon footprint which is created. When we talk about the ESG matrix, we normally go back and then look at what does our entity do. So once we have the material, of course, we have scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. 2 and 3 is an extension like this, where it starts looking at what is beyond you and what is the indirect contributions. Similar to this, in the case of LCA, the differentiating factor is, in the case of LCA, we are talking about a product and its life cycle. So this end-to-end approach is what categorizes or what differentiates or what is the approach towards the LCA. So that is the first fundamental thing in comparison to the ESG matrix. It is the entire life cycle of a particular product, irrespective of the reporting unit. That's what we basically look at. Now, what are the objectives behind the LCA? As I said, in the case of ESG, we go much beyond the environment. We get into the social impact, what the organization creates through its operation. We look at whether the operations of the company are done in accordance with the laws governing that company. So governance becomes important. But in the case of LCA, it is narrowed down to one single topic, which is the environmental impact. Again, the word environmental goes along with impact. That is, due to your operation or due to your production or due to the way in which you have actually manufactured or due to the way in which you have actually presented yourself as a product company using certain raw material, what is the carbon footprint which you have created by making or by manufacturing that particular product, right from the material extraction till its grave, which is till it is disposed of. How much is the carbon footprint which your company is creating over a period of time? So this is what the end-to-end approach of LCA about. Well, what are the objectives of LCA? It is to identify the hotspots on environmental impact. That is, when you actually do these operations, when you actually start deciding that what raw material will I use for my manufacturing process, when you start looking at what exactly is the way or which market am I selling, all of this has multiple implications of carbon footprint. Suppose that I decide that I make an export. That would mean that my product needs to be transported over a over distances, which involves third-party logistics, which creates more and more emissions into the earth. So the objective is actually to find out what are the hotspots in the entire process of sourcing, procurement, manufacturing, ultimately usage, and also the disposal. So this is, in short, what is that which is LCA topic covers by itself. Now, why is that LCA is important? When we talk about ESG matrix, we all know about the importance which the environmental reporting has got. We also know about the importance of sustainability. We also know about the importance of having as low as possible carbon footprint being created by our entity. Now, when we say so, many of our decisions should be influencing these outcomes. For these decisions to be taken, it's extremely important to understand what is the carbon footprint which is created by my product when I actually decide to manufacture, and also I decide to do it in the way it is. So you know that from a perspective now, going from a perspective of how the LCA will help, it definitely the LCA meets into the environmental quality standards. Now, let us suppose that what type of packaging material you're taking a call that that I am in the packaging industry. Now, what type of packaging material will I use? It's very important to understand as to what is the carbon footprint which is likely to be created by the product which you decide to manufacture. And also, once you have a detailed study about what all raw material am I using, what all are the other possibilities, a detailed study breaking up into multiple stages helps you to make decisions to reduce the impact on environmental profile of the product. It also helps in identifying the areas where the improvements can be made on the sustainability. It helps you with the production process because extremely important availability of raw material, and that too with an inefficient production process would mean that the usage of electricity, the usage of water will all be high. If you do a product study, start comparing with your competitors, start comparing with the other material or the other material which will be used for the production process. It will all help you to reduce or optimize the production process and reduce the environmental impact. It also helps you to minimize the recycling process. Of course, once the material goes out, it does not mean that you are not responsible for the impact on the environment. So it is extremely important to look at what is possible to minimize the recycling options and the reusable options, and also to reduce the wastage. Now, getting into the next slide, it is about the phases of LCA. There are 4 different phases of LCA. That is like any other study, whether you look at ESG or any other topic, there has to be a definition with purpose. That is any study. So coming back, back again to the previous slide, if you look at the LCA is a tool of sustainability. Any tool should have a purpose for its usage. So when we talk about an LCA study, when you decide or your company decide that I do an end-to-end study about the product, it should have a purpose. So therefore, the intended application has to be there. Who all will be the audience for it? Why am I actually defining an LCA study for my company or for my product? Needs to be there as the first definition or a goal into the first phase itself. Then you have to define the scope. That is, what all are the functions? What will be the functional unit? The system boundaries, allocation, because there will be many costs which needs to be allocated. They cannot be directly captured. The assumptions which is made. So all of this needs to be covered under the first definition of LCA, which is the first phase of any LCA study. The second phase will be the inventory analysis. Now, what is inventory analysis? Inventory is nothing but a data collection. So what will be the data point of collections? What all data will be collected? What will be the functional unit which will be taking stock of the data? What will be my material inflow? What will be the energy what I will be using? What are the emissions which I'm likely to be created? How do I calculate? How do I adapt to each functional unit? How do I accumulate ultimately into the whole life cycle assessment and a footprint or the emission footprint, what will be calculated across? So this is one area where the inventory will be analysis or the data will be analyzed and then looked at how the data will be captured and what needs to be done. This is the important phase of data calculation. Then once we have the data with us, then we do the impact analysis. That is basically to examine the environmental perspective. On the environmental perspective, what all are the key indicators or the takes from the results, which are the results of this study. So it all involves into making comparative informations, interpretations, looking at the selection process. What was the scope which was defined initially? What are the results which is coming out? How the calculations are made, and finally, what is the data which is coming out of that? And then you get into the stage of interpretation, that is looking at the results, how the improvements can be made, how the conclusions can be reached, and what type of decisions can be taken. So these are the 4 different phases of an LCA study or an assessment. Now, a little bit deeper onto the LCA process. If you look at the goal in this slide, where I have put across the goal, scope, definition, inventory analysis, impact assessment, interpretation, this is always a iterative process. In the sense, once you define the goal, does not mean that once you have the interpretation with you, you does not go and change your goal and scope for the next assessment or the next cycle of LCA. Because you will have, once you have the interpretation, you will have many takes from that, looking at what should have been done better as far as the scope is concerned, how the goal should have been defined separately, what data was available with us, what was the actual impact, whether you have to basically look at a little more to look at that whether that impact study has to be a little more focused. So this is always an interactive, continuous and continuing process. So LCA on its face itself, it is a continuing process where the goals, once it is defined, it can be revisited after the first initial study, and it keeps on making continuous improvement. Now, let us break the LCA into the different stages on its real-time applications. Now, if you look at the product, it has got, say, we can say that it has got three different stages. One is the cradle. Of course, between the cradle and the grave, there are three different stages. One is the cradle to gate, and gate to grave. Cradle to gate is you as a manufacturer should be sourcing many of the raw materials. The raw material is the cradle. That is, you have got the raw material, you have got the other resources, which is all available in the environment for multiple purposes. From there, it has actually moved to your factory. That's your gate. So your in gate. So at that stage or till that stage, you have got many activities which is being done by someone on your product, which has already created a sort of environmental impact. It has already created a footprint of carbon. Then gate to gate, that is within you. You have actually got the material, then you have manufactured using many of the resources back again. Then you have a gate, that is input to output. You have many environmental impact which has been created by your activity. Then from the gate, when it is moving, it goes to the user. So from your out gate, it moves to the user. During that movement itself, you are again creating a carbon footprint. There is an environmental impact, which is up to the stage of users. At the time of usage itself, again, after the usage, there is a disposal practice. So after the usage, the disposal comes, then it has to go back into the earth. Now, during this process itself, which is the grave, also there is an environmental impact. Now, let's define this with an example back again of the gloves. Now, I'll quickly go to the gloves industry, as an example. Now, in the case of, say, a gloves industry, a gloves can be manufactured of various raw material. It can be cotton, it can be nitrile, it can be rubber, it can be many other substance. It can be plastic or different type of gloves. Now, the natural tendency, if you look at only the sustainable practices, is to see and then define that my factory, if it has more of cotton gloves production, I am environmentally friendly. That's the first tendency to say. That's because the requirement for conversion of cotton into a gloves is relatively energy friendly. So therefore, and also the emissions are much lower. So the tendency is to say that the cotton gloves manufacturing has got limited environmental impact, while we are conveniently forgetting the amount or the volume of water which is required for cotton cultivation. When we talk about CO2 emissions, when we talk about energy, it is not about, or when we talk about environment, it is not about CO2 alone. It's not about the energy alone. There are other resources like water. There are many other resources which actually comes in for the production at different stages on the life cycle of a particular product. Nitrin, on the other hand, has very limited water usage. For making a like-to-like comparison, for the cotton on an end-to-end basis, if you look at, it uses around almost like 800 times the nitrile gloves water consumption is. Now, what is the impact which is created by this particular one on the cotton gloves. Rubber gloves, on the other fact, might be low on certain things, but is highly energy consumed. Now, this is from a product category perspective. Beyond this, where do you manufacture is also extremely important. And how do you manufacture is also extremely important. There has been many studies on this, particularly on the gloves industry, where it has been proved beyond doubt that the gloves which is made in Asia has got a much higher carbon footprint as compared to what has been made in the European countries is primarily because the energy source and the efficiency on the production in Europe is far better than what is done in Asia. That would mean that when something is manufactured in Asia, the energy consumption and the carbon footprint is much higher as compared to what was prepared in when it is prepared in European Union. Now, that's primarily because that the source from which they are sourcing the electricity and how this electricity finally get consumed and how many carbon footprint happens, it gives us an indication. Now, all of this is possible only if you do a detailed study of the environmental impact that a product creates over its lifetime. This is, then going through different phases, as I said, about when you look at the actual application, looking at the cater to gate, gate to gate, gate to grave, many of that as an LCA study, it gives you an indication as to how much your product is actually creating the on the environmental footprint and what impact is it making. Now, the importance again of studying the LCA is once you study, you will understand. That is, once you go into the detail of the environmental footprint which is created across, it will give you many answers. That whether if you look at that where to manufacture. Now, if you decide that where should I, or that you have to take a call or you have to take a decision that where do I manufacture or where do I set up my next unit? Again, you might have to look at what is going to be my product, where it is going to be manufactured, what are the different possibilities before me. For taking all of this decision, you need to go back, start looking at LCA as a study, do it, come back into the practice of that, and then look at the sustainability goals, what you are trying to define. So this is the actual application, what we normally make in the industries with the LCA study. Now, so to sum up, that as I said, it is about the stage-wise evaluation, the materials used, the different types of inputs or the raw materials, the electricity, the water disposal, the place of manufacturing. It's all extremely important to understand the net carbon footprint that a product makes, and then to compare and look at what all the improvements can be made by your product. So it's about the holistic view or, that to foster the decision making. So that is the application of LCA. Now, LCA, if you look at LCA per se, is a tool of sustainability. LCA or the life cycle assessment also has got many softwares which actually helps because, as I said, there are multiple phases through which the LCA process has to happen. These are data validated, data supported. The data has to be quantified. The data has to be accurate. Again, greenwashing is not possible. Greenwashing does not help any purposes as well. So, and therefore, and also all the environmental risk need to be captured. So all of this needs, Excel working is not possible. So therefore, there has to be multiple tools also for the LCA. There are various tools which is available across the globe. Many tools are softwares which makes the the life cycle assessment. Some of these tools are very specific, many are generic. Some are open software, which is available, like one LCA, and some are industry specific, as I said, and some are generic. But by using all this or by leveraging the use of the LCA tools, what the companies effectively do is to simplify the whole process of assessing, first defining the scope, looking at the quantification of the environmental footprints, identifying the hotspots, and then looking at interpretations through the use of these tools. The areas normally covered by these tools or the softwares are the carbon footprint and also the water footprint, the eco design, the environmental product declaration, the life cycle costing. So all of this is what normally is covered in the LCA tools, which is available. So it's primarily all these tools helps in identifying the environmental risk and also in helps in the sustainable practices. Data availability is extremely important, whichever way you look at, because all these processes needs to be validated and it has to be supported by the data what is available. Now, looking at the regulatory implications. First, I will look at that from an India perspective, we know about the importance of BRSR. From an Indian context, and its connector of BRSR has got as a lead program. We know about the accounting standards which has already come out on the sustainable practices. We will look at what is LCA's connect with the BRSR. Now, the Indian companies, primarily the top 1,000 as of now on reporting, which could actually lead to many more companies going to report onto the BRSR. It's a leading, BRSR is a leading sustainable practice, but it has got many, this BRSR has many requirement of LCA. We will look at which all are the two principles where the BRSR clearly states about the requirement of an LCA study to be done. That is principle 2 and principle 6. The principle 2 is about reporting on environmentally sustainable business, where it requires the companies to disclose their risk and concern as identified in the LCA study. So, those which is on the principle 2, when we make declarations on the BRSR, there is a specific requirement about the LCA study. That is, the life cycle assessment has to be made by those companies. It has to disclose as well the risk and the concerns which is coming out of the LCA study. It also requires, that is the principle also requires you to exhibit the actions which has been taken to mitigate those risk and concerns. So the LCA study becomes extremely important from the point of practicing the BRSR or practicing the sustainability. Now, continuing with the principle 2 itself, it also requires the companies to disclose the information on the usage of the reused and the recycled input material. So, there is a requirement which clearly states that how do you actually make use of many of those material which is on a recycled manner. This is primarily with the objective that the sustainability improves and also that the environmental impact is reduced. The LCA study helps you to identify the initiatives which has been taken by the company and then make an exhibition into the principle 2. Principle 6, which is about the reporting of the efforts of environmental protection and the restoration, which is defined under principle 6. There we have to give, or the company has to give, the details of the energy and the water intensity and also about the emission intensity by the physical units. It also needs to highlight the various initiatives to reduce the GHG emissions and also explain about the wastewater practices management practice, LCA or a study actually helps to not only substantiate but also highlight about the specific initiatives which has been taken by the company over the reduction of the emission and the effluent discharges. So the connect of LCA is there for the BRSR as a supporting tool. It also helps, that is the LCA also, or the study also helps, not only study, it's following its practice. The measuring is only the first step. LCA helps in companies to transparently report their BRSR initiatives, their strategy, their initiatives on sustainability. The companies, those are planning to achieve the net zero emission, decarbonization strategies can definitely strategically use the LAC tools to effectively look at, to highlight the direct and indirect carbon emissions and also the hotspots which is within the company. Now, if as we all know, the scope 1 is something which is within the company. The scope 2, scope 3 is outside of the company. Scope 2 is something which is by your own or your value chain, while scope 3 is completely outside your company. By doing an end-to-end comparison or end-to-end analysis of a product, the LCA helps substantially onto the product impact on the environmental effect, the environmental sustainability. Now, that is from a BRSR perspective. From an international perspective, LCA again is a tool. Now, the tool need to be governed because you know that how do you define your goals? How do you define your scope? How do you make your own inventory? Or how do you make your own data? How do you capture your own data? How do you analyze those data? How do you come out with results? All of these needs a structured approach. That is LCA by itself. Each company cannot decide that what should be the coverage. Each company cannot decide what could be, the definition of the reporting unit. All of this needs to follow some structure so that the data, what is done on the LCA study, will be extremely useful for the company, for its competition, for the regulatory authorities, and also for the general public. So it is governed by the ISO standards, ISO 14040 and ISO 14044 are the ground rules on how the LCA study should be conducted and also the frameworks that needs to be followed. So these two standards forms the basis of the foundation of an LCA. Besides this, on the carbon footprint, we have specific ISO standard of 1467 on the carbon footprint of the products in quantifiable terms. Then we have other ISO standards for the environmental labels and declarations. Then we have many other standards. Some are very specific for certain products. Some are textile centric. Some are automobile centric. Some are cement industry specific. All of this gives you the structure or the framework or a protocol to standardize the framework for measuring and managing not only the emissions, but also of how the entire process of the life cycle assessment takes place. This is from a regulatory perspective and also from a policy implication perspective. Now, I am getting into my last slide, which is the advantages on the LCA. Now, the LCA gives very clear indicators about how first assessing the environmental impact and then to look at stage-wise how things can be improved by the company on its production process, on its sourcing, on its transportation, on its ultimate usage, and finally on its disposal. So it gives us very clear indicators which all are the hotspots, which all are the environmental impact, which is involving this LCA, or which is involving the product what you are manufacturing. So it gives us a clear picture across the product life category rather than restricting itself into the production process within the company or the entity. The LCA, all LCA information are in a quantified manner. That is the entire life cycle assessment, the entire life cycle definition, the entire life cycle data collection, the entire life cycle output, the entire life cycle comparison, interpretation is all quantified. That is, we don't say that that our manufacturing process is good or our manufacturing processes follows these standards, so therefore it has to be better. No. In the case of LCA, we definitely capture for the product what has been the usage, how much of water has been consumed, how much of raw material at the time of raw material generation, how much has been the water consumption, how much has been the electricity consumption. All of this is in a quantified manner. It's completely a data-driven exercise or a data-driven tool, which makes it extremely easy for comparative purposes and for interpretations and coming to the conclusions, because all are data supported. Now, the life cycle thinking also becomes a real cornerstone towards the policy making and also on creating the sustainability criteria. As I said, in the case of gloves manufacturing, in the case of many other industries, the entire life cycle assessment actually gives you a complete view about what is the product on which you are actually working on, what are the production processes through which you actually undergo your production process, what all are the different stages, where do you manufacture. All of this end-to-end concept gives us a real arm about deciding what should be the policies for improving the sustainable practice if we come to know about the life cycle, about the environmental impact if it is made during the life cycle of the product. It also enables the scientific benchmarking. That is, once you do the study, it clearly indicates you can benchmark it with the industry standard to look at how you can improve the sustainability during different stages of your production, during the sourcing. How can I source it from a different market? How can I look at how I can improve upon the sustainability? How can I improve the carbon footprint for my company? It's all possible if in case that you are actually doing a deep dive study through the lifespan or the life cycle, the life cycle assessment of the product. It also helps the regulatory bodies to set up legislative guidelines on sustainable practices. So it's not about getting back by saying that in this particular area or in this area where the water is scarce, we will not extract the water from the ground level. It can be the regulatory bodies can look at that the end use or the way it is being used. It all helps to look at which industry needs promotion, which type of production should be promoted. All of this are possible through again through the LCA approach. Again, LCA, an end-to-end approach as compared to the traditional sustainability reports. The traditional sustainable report standards basically talk about what you have control on. and also on your supply chain. But this goes much beyond, where it actually looks at on an end-to-end approach. The whole logistics are being covered. And the analytical capability, that is, once you have the data, you also have a very good tool of to understand what could be my capacity building capability, what should on which I should be investing, what are my sustainable priorities. So where do I make my investment, in which product should I actually make investment, which is giving me much more on the sustainability rather than that using up on the resources. So for all this, the study helps, and it also makes the continuous process improvement. That is, as I said, that the life cycle assessment are broken into stages. So therefore, it is this continuous process is done on stage-wise basis, which actually helps to understand and look at to make continuous improvement on each of the stages, and then to have an actionable KPIs. It also helps on the risk prioritization, which risk I take, which risk that I actually forgo on. Now, this it's not about that the advantages of LCA alone. It is also about this particular study, or this particular tool also comes with its own weaknesses and challenges. It's primarily because the challenges are the availability of data. Before we come to the availability of the data, there are many assumptions which is required, because when you study about a product which is on which the raw material itself is coming from someone, so that would mean there are many assumptions or many data or reliability of data, which all needs to assume that there is a linear curve. So we have to make a normal assumption that it's a normal operating system. As I said in a previous example, in the case of gloves manufacturing on a train product, the manufacturing, when it happens in Europe, it has got lower emissions. It's primarily because of an abnormal situation in Asia, or a different situation in Asia. So when we do the LCA study, one of the important thing is you also have to look at what are the conditions on which these companies are operating, or this product has operated, or this function has operated, and look for the abnormalities on its comparison and also in its publication, because that also goes hand in hand with the LCA study, which needs to be supplementing to make it more meaningful. So one of the biggest weaknesses is that not that all conditions of operation are normal. There could be abnormalities on the situations which could actually that have an impact onto the LCA studies. Then there is data availability. Like any other system, data availability becomes extremely important. Limited set of data available with us, relying on many other data which is which is made available. Questionable data quality. Then again, regional relevance, which is extremely important. Like that what is relevant in one region may be not so specific. Like that the biodiversity, the eco diversity, all of that makes the data a little more non-reliable. If it is, then you have a limitation onto the study of the LCA. Now, where are we heading as far as the LCA is concerned? Now, LCA, as I said, is a very important one for the environmental impact, to assess the environmental impact, and also to judge the impact that it has created on the environment. But it stops there. Now, the future of LCA will be to actually stretch it beyond that, to look into the social. Already there are talks on the social LCA and also on the ethical dimensions which needs to come in. to make it a little more comprehensive. But from the perspective of the sustainability, a life cycle assessment of the product helps improve the product sustainability and also helps you to understand which all are the pressure area on these which is created by the production process and which is by the decisions what you are making on the manufacturing. So that's what I have today on my presentations. So I
Yes,
can be
sir.
reached on the emails a little ahead of my schedule. That this is what I have not deep dive into. That the too technicality onto the LCA. I have primarily tried to restrict onto the topic, and it's connected with the BRSR and also with the other sustainable practices.
Sir, we are posting the question answer in the chat box. We have posted the question answer.
Okay. Yeah. The first one I'm seeing is how to get the data for the LCA analysis. Of course, the data availability, as I said, that the data availability is extremely important. And for that, we have multiple, going back into the sustainability reporting itself, there is a lot of data which needs to be collected. Similarly, in the case of LCA, the data requirement can be taken as from a three different perspective. One is the data till it reaches your gate, your production data, then the data of the material after it has left your organization. All this data at three different stages, that is from cradle to the gate, from gate to gate, and from gate to the grave, needs to be captured. On that, let's first look at the first stage of data which is required. That is the data on raw material. So the data on raw material extraction has to have or need to be taken from the suppliers if in case that you have only you are sourcing only from the market, the raw material from the market. That data, that is the raw material data or the data on the environmental impact created by that raw material, what has been created, has to come from the supplier. It is like, that the scope 1, scope 2 declarations and the scope 3 declarations, these data need to come from the suppliers. The data, what is there from gate to gate, is your own data, what is available. And the data which is after that, that is from the gate to the grave, is something which needs to be again captured and then given by the users of your product and also by the ultimate disposal. When it takes place, the person who is disposing needs to provide you the data. Now, where does this data come from and what are the tools which is to be used? So we need to use the tools to actually capture this data, make it available to the suppliers to figure out and to find out from them what reliable data is required to calculate the footprint of the product at the time of manufacturing, at the time of sourcing, at the time of extraction, and also at the time of disposal. So the data needs to be converted, or it should be in a convertible form from the suppliers as well as from the ultimate users. The second one is, what is the prospects of practicing CA in the field of LCA and in which industry? Now, see, if you look at the BRSR as a practice, BRSR has got many practitioners. CA is one of that. Why CA? That's primarily because that we have been the main pillars for financial reporting. Where does the financial reporting happen? It happens in the annual accounts. In the annual accounts now, it has become extremely important for anybody to understand what does the company do much beyond the financial matrices or much beyond the financial numbers. That is how the non-financial reporting has come in place. So the annual accounts preparation has dragged many of us into the non-financial reporting as well, because that is part of your annual reports, which goes to all the stakeholders. Similar, now that would mean that it is not for the BRSR or for the sustainability practice. It's not about the chartered accounts alone. There are other practices also. There are the energy audit, which takes place. There are social auditors. There are social impactors. There are guys from the engineering background looking at and helping us with looking at what is a calculation for the emissions. So these, at the same time, the chartered accountants involvement into the BRSR practice has gone up tremendously, is primarily because of their connect to the financial output and also for the other practices, including the social and the social practice, as well as the governance as well. Similar is the case here also from a data perspective. Now, how do you calculate these data? Now, these data, what we require for the LCA could be technical, but still, who is going to be the ultimate user of it? The financial situation of a company will improve only if we are making improvements on our practices. In the case of LCA, it is not alone or it is not done only for the environmental practice. It is also to understand how a change in the LCA, in the environmental practice, can bring in efficiency into your production process. That is because if you are improving the production process, you actually improve the sustainable practice, you actually reduce the environmental impact. And when we actually do that, you actually are also improving upon your production process. You are relooking at your manufacturing standards. So, from a practice perspective, the chartered accountants being the center for the financial performance can actually help in assessing, in judging the life cycle practices, and also in reducing the impact on the environment, as well on improving the production process. So there's a big linkage between these to give it as a chartered accountant to help. Now, from a practice perspective, ESG practice is now, that I will a little go back into LCA, consider LCA as one among the tools on the ESG practice. Now, the ESG practice for a practicing chartered accountant, from a BRSR perspective, if you look at the 1,000 listed companies now needs to have, as part of their non-financial reporting matrix, a structured way of reporting the non-financial database. That is a big area of looking at, because it's not about that it's ESG. To me, that there are two things. One is ESG practice and one is ESG reporting. Now, BRSR basically is like a reporting tool. From a practicing chartered accountants perspective, you can get very actively involved into the practice side. That is, how can you make differences on the ESG output? That being said, the same set, we can actually look at how do we make improvements onto the entire life cycle assessment process of a product. So this, the practicing chartered accountant can definitely look at in a much detailed manner onto the LCA practice for collecting of the data and also comparing the data and also publishing the results and also helping the companies to have decision making basis the output. Now, can we have a discussion on the linkage between LCA and materiality assessment? Now, the materiality assessment, we have to go back a little bit onto the ESG practice. What is materiality? Now, the materiality assessment is where we have multiple factors within the organization on which what is material for reporting. That is the materiality assessment. That is, there will be many factors and on which that you may not have all the data what is available from an environmental perspective. What all are the material factors which needs to be considered is which defines on the materiality assessment. In the case of LCA, it is about the product life category. Now, first we have to basically look at whether on the materiality assessment for a company, whether that particular production process creates a lot of hotspots, then the LCA can help us to define what is important for the materiality assessment. Now, what are the challenges faced during the LCA assessment? During the LCA assessment, as I said, there are, if you go back into this slide, the previous slide, yeah, the basic challenge what we face is the data availability. Point number one. That is, that because in the case of the entire life cycle assessment, it is much beyond your own company. It goes beyond your, it goes to the raw material sourcing as well as the extraction. It also goes beyond the gate of yours, that is the output gate. So therefore, all this data availability is something which is extremely critical. So therefore, the one of the biggest challenge what is faced by the LCA is the data availability and its collection. Yeah, I'm through with the questions.
Sir, these are all the questions.
Okay.
Yeah, we are just handing over to Mr. Tejas.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir,
you.
for your insightful presentation on life cycle assessment. Your expertise and knowledge has provided us with a valuable understanding of this crucial tool for sustainable decision making. Your comprehensive overview of LCA from its concepts and framework to its applications in various industries have been enlightening. Your discussion has given us a clearer picture of how LCA can be effectively implemented. Your guidance on overcoming the challenges and seizing the opportunities presented by LCA will be invaluable to our efforts to promote sustainable practices. We would like to express our sincere gratitude to our chairperson and vice chairman of SRSB for their invaluable guidance and support in organizing this webinar. Their leadership and commitment to sustainability have been instrumental in fostering a platform for knowledge sharing and collaboration. Furthermore, We extend our appreciation to all participants who have been actively engaged in the discussions and contributed to the overall success of this event. Your thoughtful questions and insights and perspective have enriched our understanding of LCA and its applications. Together, we have taken a significant step towards promoting sustainable practices and building a more resilient future. Thank you all for your participation. Stay informed and continue your journey towards sustainability excellence by joining us in the future webinar. The next webinar will be on 18th October 2024 on GRI. Thank
Thank
you,
you,
sir.
sir.
Thank you.
Thank you.